Welcome back to the Supply Chaney podcast. I am your host, Nathan Chaney, and today we are talking with Jake Shild, who is the founder and CEO of LandskyAI. I've come across LandSky, I think, at a conference in the past and have just been really interested in what they've been doing. It's a little bit different than what we typically run into in the world of supply chain every day. But it's actually a really needed, I think, sort of service and technology that a lot of warehouses, outdoor storage spaces, and just anyone that's running a facility, I think would have a lot of interest in hearing about and learning about. Jake, thanks for coming on today and sharing a little bit of your time and your experience with us. Can you give us a little bit more about your background, where you were raised, tell us a little bit about your roots and how we got to this part here where we're having this podcast conversation?
Yeah, of course. And thanks for having me on, Nathan. Really excited. Was super cool to actually be in a podcast in the supply chain industry. And how I originally got started and got involved with LandSky and then kind of that supply chain connection. So my original background is in security integration. So think, like card readers, turnstiles, maybe more advanced like video analytics, things like that, focused on commercial buildings in Manhattan, actually. So I came from a family security integration business. So grew up in that. That meant when I was even 10 years old, hearing about, card readers and the problems associated with them. So I was not really by choice having to hear about it, but then got very involved as I got older, from high school to college. Later on, winter, summers, doing, installation work, then IT related work, and then getting more involved in emerging technologies and the strategy around that. And while I was still on that side, actually was the first time I ran into, and this will end up being talked about more when I even talk about like what we're doing today, but ran into what we call a drone in a box company for the first time. So you could think of this like, for now, for simply thinking about it, think of it as just an automated drone system. Sits in a box, essentially, for a crude term, but like a nest on site, and it flies out and does patrols. And it wasn't the same one we work with now and wasn't as advanced then, but it's still incredible technology. We were excited to show it off to end users. They understood the benefits of it compared to, say, traditional guarding or security alone with how we were looking at it then. Quickly got demos set up, did different pilots, and they all liked the technology. They thought it was awesome, but there's a bunch of hurdles that actually popped up that stopped the adoption. So that was ranging from a lot of, actually, I'll say ranging, but a lot of it had to do with human inputs. It was, who's going to operate these systems, or for drones specifically in the air, you still needed a certified Part 107 pilot. Not necessarily want to train staff because they might have high turnover, especially if it was guarding, to being nervous they're not keeping up with the latest technology. At the time, you're really, whether it's ground or air, just getting a moving camera, essentially. Different kind of went on is different hurdles that were stopping the adoption of this technology. And that's when I realized there was actually a need for this in the market, or there needed to be a company that actually solve this problem. And the idea of LandskyAI was to make the adoption of robotics simple. So we're not focused only on the security side. That was kind of where our roots are and where it came from. But the whole idea of what we're looking to do is to provide a true turnkey package around drones or robotics for safety use cases, and now a lot related to, say, different types of inspections that we're doing. And on the security side, that's where we call a true virtual guard situation. But what we've looked to build out is a true white glove service. You get these automated drones or robots. We have the back end infrastructure supporting that, so the end user doesn't need to do much work. Because the whole idea to us is, if they're trying to automate and you tell the end user they actually need to, hire someone, do different certifications, tell them they need to invest in this and that, it kind of starts to defeat the purpose of automation. So we look to really create a seamless adoption process.
Gotcha. Where did the sort of inspiration for LandSky, like the name, come from? Did that take a while, or was that a pretty quick one?
So I actually owe that to my sister, Hope. When I was first starting off, that's like when you're having before the company's formed, some of the easier fun moments. It's always fun while it's very stressful, but that was one of those more fun moments that actually popped up while we were still there. We were all texting back and forth, and, we knew we wanted to be hardware agnostic. We knew we wanted to work with ground robots. We knew we wanted to work with aerial based drones, and the AI side was more dealing with like the video analytics side. And then I don't remember the exact way that she came up with it. I think we were all kind of close to that area, but then I do owe her the credit, and it was due to the drones and robotics side.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that a lot of folks probably listening are pretty familiar with drones, especially like using drones for in warehouses for auditing inventory and that sort of thing. But I think maybe what folks listening may be less familiar with is the ground part of this. Can you talk a little bit about what the hardware looks like, what a use case looks like on the land piece of the business?
Yes. So when we're looking at the ground side, a lot of it spun off from that idea of when I was mentioning virtual guarding before. So the concept around it, and it really was the first use of the technology, I'd say, was a lot of times in security. I mean, manufacturing has always been high on robotics, but the concept was you were looking at how right now you might in a mall parking lot or other parking. Usually it is like a wide parking lot or campus environment. You'd have a guard or someone similar. They're driving around in a van or golf cart. They have, the orange flashing light going off and might be just sitting there, or they're driving around. You don't really know exactly what they're doing. So a lot of the initial stuff of ground robotics that we were working on or saw was based around really replacing that scenario or augmenting the ability of those guards that were on site. Thing that's interesting, even with the ground systems, though, because it is the same concept. You'd maybe use a drone I was describing. You patrol. You could have it go to different areas on the property. You could have it go on its own, charge on its own. It acts probably better if it's really there if you want something big and a physical deterrent that someone could see to replicate that. But similar to drones, you have it now where you have all these, multiple cameras on board, different sensors on there where it becomes a thing where there's no reason you can't use that data to, all that visual data coming in to do some other use cases. So some examples could even just be quality of life where, you could detect, if there's a person laying on the ground to, garbage can getting full to, maybe you want to see how many, if the correct license plates are in the parking lot, if it's an employee only lot. Maybe it is for asset inspections, it's at a level, it's usually 4 to 6 feet high, a lot of these systems, or, maybe it's at a level, it could actually look out, read some different, whether it's QR barcodes or other sort of object recognition around that. So ground systems, it shares a lot of principles with that. It's actually a bit easier to run different forms of advanced analytics because a lot of it has to do with the kind of direction of the camera when you're training models and how far away it is and how difficult it is for the cameras to see some things. Them just being on the ground is actually pretty advantageous for these video analytic capabilities and being able to do different inspections and really customize what you're looking at.
All right, all right. From a drone perspective, and one of the reasons, like some of the conversations I've been having with you all for folks I'm helping out is it seems like there's a lot of indoor drone inventory sort of solutions out there, and when I was kind of looking for solutions in this space, I approached those folks and I was like, hey, I've got an outdoor use case, and everyone was like, nope, not going outside. We only inside, only indoors. Can you tell us a little bit? To me, it sounds like the outdoor drone sort of stuff is harder, because you've got regulations that you've got to comply with. So can you talk a little bit about kind of the hurdles or the challenges associated with having an outdoor drone solution?
Yeah, so a lot of times it even pops up with a lot of the initial drones, even if you were using a more manual DJI or Skydio or other types of systems, they weren't necessarily built with the idea at first of, we're going to look for some of these more intricate details or look at something. Maybe it is like a barcode or maybe it is like a actual serial number. So even just from that first stage, there was already knowing that there's different AI and customizations you need to work on with the actual manufacturer themselves, and then us individually, even for the software side. So you're coming from that basis of, it's already more challenging, kind of how I was describing with the ground systems or even a fixed camera. It is more challenging when you're moving. And then also, even if you're not moving, you're usually at an elevated point of view and trying to make sure you have the right camera quality to look at, say, some intricate detail or barcode when you are scanning. So there is that side that was taking some time. You had to make sure you could actually do it properly, do these different scans. Also, too, I know like the FAA gets brought up a lot. So there's a few different ways that you can operate with that. But a lot of times some parties will just go directly to get a beyond visual line of sight waiver. So that's if they know truly they're not going to have any employees on site involved with the system, or it's going to be fully remote. They'll go and they'll actually apply for that. The good thing is the FAA has become much faster to respond and also much more open and actually granting, I'd say, a lot more in recent history than previously of those beyond visual line of sight waivers. And especially if, it's one thing if you are in an urban environment, you're, flying over unsuspecting people or uninvolved people, they call it. And, there's a lot of foot traffic. Then they might not like it so much. But typically, if you're in a, private property, it's pretty remote, you're, not necessarily like at the airport with your solution, you usually are going to have better luck when you're applying for it, especially if you have a drone system that you work with where it checks a lot of the safety boxes they look for. Like if it was going to be controlled remotely, you need to know that you're going to know what the weather's like. You need to know that you can still have some sort of visual feed to check in on the drone, kind of understand air traffic, make sure it's not flying. If, say, there's a plane or helicopter that's under a certain amount of feet nearby, any temporary flight restrictions. So you have to use a software that takes a lot of that stuff into account. And you could operate, say, without a waiver, maybe if the employees on site were going to be controlling the system and it wasn't necessarily in any special airspace, or even could have it where it could be operated, say, remotely, but then it's actually still someone on site acts as what we call a visual observer. Doesn't mean they need a certification. They essentially have to have the ability to see the drone and be able to communicate in real time with the actual remote pilot themselves. So there's a few different ways to do it, but those are, I would say now it is simpler going through, but especially for if people haven't, like we're in the weeds because my company is dealing with drones all the time, and that's our main, our bread and butter. But of course, I think it does still scare people off just because they know that there's regulations attached to it that they just sometimes might, not really want to look into it because they're nervous. Just the word regulations can sometimes make people nervous, I know. So I would say those are probably some of the biggest ones. And then, it's still a lot of education now, people learning about technology, because a lot of it, I wasn't at the beginning comparing it to guarding, but we do even see where it doesn't even need to be, necessarily it's a replacement or anything. A lot of times it could even just be augmenting the ability of staff on site, or, instead of that person who was now going to have to go like walk through and look at like 1,000 tanks or something or trailers and a day and try to make sure they properly mark everything and track it. They can actually even be assigned another task or even help out in another way, or even be involved in the actual drone in operations. We even make sure to bring that up, especially with the education side. That doesn't need to be, hey, it's not, no one's taken over, because I know sometimes people get nervous about that, drones and robots, but really think it's going to create a very effective environment for humans to collaborate in.
Could you share an example of like a successful implementation or deployment kind of in the real world, maybe in a supply chain type of use case, if you've got one?
Yeah, so I'll give two. One, because we built this site a lot. This one, we have one of our autonomous drone systems there. It sits in a hive. It essentially takes off, performs different missions there. And it is for, it's actually a general contracting company developer, but they have this site where it's essentially their main warehouse for a lot of different, I'd say, whether it's boom lifts to trucks, trailers, then they have fabrication there. So then they are actually moving all their material that they ship in for projects does go through there and move out. So we have it one side where we are doing the pure security. We're making sure no one's breaking in, stealing catalytic converters, anything like that. We do have it also where we're actually able to do construction site progress for them, because that site they ended up doing a new project on. We're able to fly to those waypoints and just get every day different images and just upload it to a folder for them. But then specifically for tracking, we're working out different ways that we can actually, besides just counting vehicles, getting more granular, how many lifts are on site here right now, how many trailers, how many actual just pickup trucks, to looking at the different equipment and training the models to identify them. And a cooler one we did actually, that was another recent pilot that was actually for a large retail chain's distribution center, was we were actually with our manufacturer using an AI program that it would essentially take a photo at each waypoint we set up, and it's along a whole loading dock, so trailers on both sides. What we had it doing was actually reading off and giving us the serial numbers that were on there, the brand of the truck, and then other identifiable marks that were on there. So that was probably the coolest and latest one that we worked on, was actually being able to get some of that data, where previously, and currently they still at most sites are having people walk through, 3 people at once, walk through, collect data, just write down what the serial numbers are, where it is. And now at least you can have this, say, drone system actually with the GPS location, and then also being able to see the serial numbers and show where these trailers are.
Awesome. So it looks like you've been at this for a couple of years now at LandskyAI, at least looking at your profile. It looks like you've been in existence, or were you in like stealth mode a little bit before that?
Yeah, so initially I was, when I still doing integration, it was kind of forming the business plan for a while, and then we had been obviously working with the drone company at that point. So then even trying to build out and figure out how we work with them or could build something with them. So there was a bit for, I'd say, before, like, we put our official date as like January 2023, but a little bit before that, like a few months before that, actually, that was when we were like doing a lot of just building out the solution, trying to make the idea around, what actually should we be including in the package that we're providing, who is going to be our main manufacturers, and what can we include to make the technology smarter. So I was, handful, few months there. Some of it, there wasn't an official company formed either while that was going on. And then we did actually form the company, and kind of that January 2023 is when we feel like we took that real formal step of actually operating more like a company.
Yeah. What are some lessons maybe that you've learned as you've gone through this entrepreneurship sort of journey for a little while? Any nuggets of wisdom you might pass on to other folks that are starting up things?
Yeah, and I'm sure it's always a lot of times not anything brand new. I will say because it's always going to be very hard, and it's going to be, it's that combination of it's going to be like the most stressful thing ever, but it's actually the most gratifying. And I'd say it really is a very gratifying process when you go through it. So I'd always just say, kind of keep your head down and just keep going with it. Nothing really replaces still that usual quote of hard work at the end of it. You'd be surprised at how many things just even pop up, just off of you just constantly, going at it. I'd always say my big ones is I always say, always stay in communication with people, or always have effective communication. I always preach, even with my team, that even if we don't have a good answer, we really can't answer a question, or we aren't sure what we're doing, or maybe they haven't even been nice to us or anything, it's always better to just give an answer, communicate, just talk to people. And that's always been actually a very successful one for us. Even as a company, we've, I think, actually grown more because we talk to people and we just tell them, like, we don't have anything for it right now, or, we might not be able to do that, but, we'd be happy to work on it, or even just kind of making sure we stay in touch. So I always think communication's pretty key one. And then I always say there's a lot of different forms of leadership as well. So as long as you feel like you're getting an effective response from your team and they're moving along well, and not everyone needs to be a big motivator or orator or anything like that. I think there's different leadership styles, and if yours is working, just keep running with it at that point.
Sure. A couple of questions maybe on the finance side of the house. Can you talk a little bit about like your funding? Are you kind of bootstrapping, or do you have investors? Can you talk a little bit about that side of the business, what that's like?
Yeah, so we initially just raised from a few private investors when we were starting off, and we still have actually been running with that right now. We are always, I'd say, kind of like any company, we're always going to be ready to take on any form of funding, or always open to different forms of funding that I'd say over time, because we likely in the future will do a more formal round of fundraising, or even more professional, I'd say. But right now we've been running pretty well actually on, I'd say, our private growth. A lot of our strategy was based around, and especially because we saw a lot of whether it's, it was in drones and robotics, but even AI and other startups, where we saw these companies that raised like $15 million, and then a year and a half later they were out of business, and we're kind of like, it's like, where did $15 million go in that short period of time? So we actually have played a pretty good strategy with it, where we're able to kind of go through that whole, I call, like, at the first year, the evangelizing period, trying to educate people, get them into the market without kind of having to necessarily be ramped up, spending all this crazy money when there was nowhere for it to go. So we've been able to, I say, grow at a very good pace that actually met the market. And now that we're seeing significant traction, we're actually very ready to expand without necessarily feeling uncomfortable, like, oh God, we got to go raise, another 3 million because we just spent all that in 1 year. So it's been in that form, it's a little closer to feels like bootstrapped at times, but it is from private investors. And then yeah, we are looking to raise into the future as well.
Cool, cool. Can you talk a little bit about your sort of revenue model, or your how you bill? Because I think you may have a subscription type model, which helps sort of those buyers and those organizations make that decision a little easier.
Yeah. So that's what we lead with is the subscription-based model. Essentially, then what it becomes like is because we'll include the hardware, software, and then all our add-on services into that one package. Not a very creative name. It's the usual one still. It's like LandSky as a service is our main package. It's the usual as a service type model. But the idea is, like I was mentioning, we have the hardware, so that could be the drone or robotics system, the software that operates it, any API or other integrations we do with the system, any training, deployment, even preventive maintenance, of course, our remote piloting service or operations package, and a few other key features with it. So we look to bundle it all together, make an easy package, and then kind of operate on that monthly fee. So it's a little easier to understand and accept than, here's the hardware, and then you're kind of we don't want to make them be in a situation where they feel like they need to be nervous to tell us about an issue because they might need to pay more for a service call or something similar to that. So we try to make sure it works well into the whole idea of it, especially on the guarding or inspection side, is you want it available as much as possible. So this model makes that a lot easier because we're able to always have those, we're always monitoring the systems, making sure they're in good health, and then also being able to replace them, say if there's an issue not due to the end user with the drone itself, maybe something we just can't replace the propellers with, we'll just make sure drone gets shipped out right away and take that one in and fix it. So really works well for us, making sure they have as much uptime as possible.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for speaking a little bit to that. Kind of staying on this entrepreneurship type of track of questions here. When you were in school, you kind of scrolling now, looks like you majored in finance, maybe.
Yeah, finance, or the fancier people, they say finance.
Okay. So kind of given where you're at and what you're doing today, there's this question I always like to ask everyone, which is tips and suggestions for students that are listening to this podcast today and say, I would like to start up like a hardware, software, tech company like LandSky. Any suggestions that you would make to them, or maybe to your younger self when you were in school, to help you accomplish where you're at today? Maybe more.
Yeah, I would say look for more advisors or people that could actually help you and have been there before. Even, I mean, business is still business. So even if it was, maybe it's not technology or going to be this, fast growing startup, but it's still a business. I think having as much mentors or advisors helpful. I probably in college and definitely should have gotten more mentors or actually looked for that. I'm in a lucky situation because I come from a family business. So I at least always had someone that I could bat ideas around. And I did gain a lot of knowledge just even without realizing it when I was even pretty young, because I was constantly, I'd be like 16 and hearing about maybe some conflict in the office or other stuff like that. So I was lucky in that sense, but I would say getting as many mentors or advisors as you can, because I think there's no better, which I know is some sort of quote, there's no better business school, I think, than actually starting a business, because, what you learn in college is great, but you don't really know until you're actually running a business or starting it, and all the little things that pop up that you need to focus on. So really having any advisor or mentor that you could just ask questions to. And honestly, especially if you were like solo founding at first, it's going to be even more important to have that advisor or mentor type relationship. And I would also say, again, usual networking, just making sure you never know if one of your classmates is going to be someone, whether it's a work relationship or you do end up bringing them on team, or find someone that's actually hungry to want to operate or start something with you is another big one. And then I always say just take a always need to be willing to take a chance. It's kind of if you really feel like you want to do it and you really think that there's something that you want to do and you can't imagine doing anything else, I would say just try it at that point, because you're still young. You could still make still recover and do something else, worst case. And usually there's no experience replacing that at that point.
Sure. You could always kind of go, I've got a friend that calls, working in a company, in an organization, he calls it being a Johnny White badge. And so that's kind of, as I've jumped out away from, corporate America a couple of years ago to kind of swim out on my own, I've always kind of had that in the back of my head. Like, if this doesn't all work out, I can always kind of go back and be a Johnny White badge one day. You know, so there's probably a consistent question that I do ask everyone that comes on, especially those ones that are in the AI space or in a space in a position to comment on AI. You literally have it in your company name, so I've got to ask you the question: what's your perspective of AI, and kind of obviously in your use case and in your type of business? I think maybe from a perspective of, where do you see the technology being, like in the cycle, the technology cycle? Are we still kind of just everyone's adopting, or are we peaked, or are we kind of cresting? Like, where do you think we're at the technology, and how do y'all use AI there?
I mean, it is kind of weird in the sense that it's still very early stage. You do have some form of widespread adoption because, you had the whole AI boom, and you have OpenAI and Anthropic and all these other companies now, where it's kind of this weird, I don't say it's like paradox, but you have this one thing where there is some form of widespread adoption of the technology. Like everyone, most people I know what OpenAI knows how to use ChatGPT a little bit as well, even if they're someone you wouldn't expect to. And then a lot of people know about this AI technology, and it's weird because it was almost like, it was a partial bubble, and then I feel like it kind of went down and then came back. So it's hard to describe for like a market where I think that it actually is, because it is very early, and I think it is going to grow significantly faster and bigger. And I think it is in a good place now, where maybe it got out some of the fluff, or there's a lot of stuff where it's just, if you were working around AI, you're maybe going to raise money or kind of get just moving at that point. So I think a lot of that fluff has been taken care of, but I think we're at an early place, say, especially on the commercial, the business and government side, where I think it's actually going to be like just the beginning, and a lot of work is going to start to open up on the AI side now, because I see it as beneficial for us if I'm talking to someone and they already have some experience of, like, they've used ChatGPT or something else, because then they get excited to talk about it, and then you're talking to them about drones and robots, and it makes a little more sense, or they're at least a little more excited about it. So I do think that widespread adoption is going to help more than it hurts. And I think we're at a very early stage still in the market, where it's widely adopted on that personal level, but on, say, the actual commercial and business applications, it's still not nearly as widely adopted, unless it is one that more basic, and it's not basic, but I mean, like one of those more functions like OpenAI is doing right now.
Gotcha. Maybe kind of like the IoT, Internet of Things sort of wave, where now we're just about to the point where toothbrushes and pillows and tires and everything is all connected into a cloud and is an IoT device. I guess at some point, everything, in the commercial side of the world as well, will have an AI component in it.
Yeah. That's what I think.
I think I have been seeing that there are electric toothbrushes with AI in them to help you
I wouldn't be
brush
surprised.
properly and stuff now.
Tell you how long you've been brushing your teeth, probably, or missing areas. I bet. I know there's a lot. That's like my newest fridge. Even it's smart in some way. Literally, all it does is tell me if the door isn't closed or something on an app. So I don't know how needed that is. I mean, I think like everything is really, they're just making, you're right, like tires you drift around, but I think really anything they could make smart, they're going to keep making smart.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about how exactly, maybe obviously not exacts, but how exactly are you all using AI in what you all do? Either, I guess, maybe on the hardware side, or your sensing, or your software and your computer vision stuff. How exactly are y'all using AI?
Yeah, so ours is more based around the actual video side. So a lot of these different real-time detections, analyzing the data. So say if a drone is going on a patrol route, first it might have started, we only want to have it detect a person, then tell the program, could you alert this person and send it via this method? But then it becomes more complex and we'll actually need to be, say, training different models. Maybe it's for a specific type of vehicle, like I was saying before. Maybe it is like that serial number as before. And the whole idea is really trying to find ways to integrate that into their existing system. So, say for a distribution center, that would mean us making sure we could, using the AI, send the drone on a flight path, tell it when you get to this waypoint, take a snapshot, read the serial numbers, essentially put that into this database, et cetera. And then that similar concept with even just the object and other detections when you are using the video side. And of course, I mean, the drone and robotic systems themselves, they are getting smarter over time. They are actually planning their own routes when they go on these missions. How are they gonna, when we're not telling it, we might tell it we want it to go to point A or point B, but it's figuring out its own route to get there, what it thinks is the most efficient and effective route to get to these different points. So it's a little bit, a few different angles that there is AI involved. A lot of our focus for what we do with the AI is on the, I'd say, side at that point, or image side.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I usually like to just leave every podcast sort of with just asking, if someone fast forwarded through this entire episode all the way to the last 1 or 2 minutes here, and you want to kind of leave something, with the audience, this is your opportunity to hop up on your soapbox, or kind of call out something that we maybe missed today that you're really passionate about.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, I mean, a big thing for what we do is, besides how I was saying before, one of our missions is to make the adoption of robotics simple. We do actually really want to help globally rapidly increase the adoption of this technology. And as a part of that, a lot of it has to do with education. So
Yeah.
I always encourage people to just reach out, even when I present to whether it's potential partners, end users, or just someone who I know probably can get one of our systems. I always prefer us to be educating end users. Is one of our values. I put as knowledgeable. We want to be thought leaders. But with that, we know a big way this technology is going to become more accepted. You have to make it less scary and you have to make it more digestible. So I always like to say, if you just want to learn about drones or robotics, or learn, what can happen in the space, or maybe you want to know, oh, I heard about this regulation. Could I ask you a question? Or want to know, what this robot might do to something more complex or even super simple. I always say just reach out. I'll usually answer most questions that get sent to my email, and then even always happy to hop on calls. But education's big for us, so we're always happy to help. So always happy to have someone reach out.
All right. Excellent. Well, thanks for coming on and talking to us a little bit today. I find what you all do and the space that y'all are in really interesting. I think there's a lot of applications in the supply chain industry. So, I'll be keeping an eye on you all from down here in Texas. So thanks for coming on today, Jake.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. I really appreciate it.